We see in the long-term diet trials comparing placebo to semaglutide, the weight loss medications, over 2 years, that the average weight loss maintenance over a 2-year time period is a 2% weight loss in the general population. Whereas on the medications, it was anywhere from 17 to 23%, depending on which medication. So the point being, without getting distracted on the medication, is that on average, people only are able to maintain about 2% weight loss. And that's on average, understanding that individuals within that study, there's a lot of inter-individual variability. Some people gain significantly more than they lose, others lose more weight than that. But there's a whole range, and I'm just saying on average, it's difficult to adhere to a diet long term. That's one of the biggest challenges we have. I've said in my obesity rant some 6-7 years ago, it's about changing behavior. That's a lot more difficult, than just working out or what have you.
Brother, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, brother. Glad to be back.
Yeah, man. Incredible time we had last time, and the guys definitely requested to have you back on. So I want to go ahead and kind of jump in here today. Let's say, imagine I'm a guy that's in his early to mid 30s, somewhat unseasoned on the training side, maybe a year, 6 months in the gym, but I got about 20, 25 pounds of fat that I'm trying to lose. But I also want to kind of optimize the muscle building side of these things. So what should be the first thing that I focus on to really optimize and get me moving in that direction of body composition?
Well, I dial in the nutrition first. It's really, they say that muscles are built in the gym, but fat is lost in the kitchen. And if we want to lose body fat, then we got to get ourselves into a calorie deficit. We can do that one of two ways or a combination of the both. And that's our energy balance equation. Total daily energy intake is all the food that we eat. And total daily energy expenditure, of course, is all the work that we do. But that consists of 4 different components, as you know. It's your basal metabolic rate, which is the vast majority of the calories you burn in a day. About 70+% of them are just keeping you alive. Your thermic effect of food, which is the amount of calories that you burn just consuming certain foods, protein being the highest of that. About 30% of the calories from protein are burned just digesting protein. Fats and carbs, much less than that, anywhere from 2 to 5%. Then you've got your non-exercise activity. This is a big one. Non-exercise activity is about 15% of the calories that you burn, and that's just kind of just moving around throughout the day. It can even be fidgeting, tapping your foot, that kind of thing. Maybe a step count. That's not a deliberate exercise. And then exercise activity is about 5% of the calories you burn every day. So that treadmill is not the most effective way to lose body fat. It's certainly great for your heart and for your lungs, and you can burn some calories there, but more cardio can be counterproductive at a point. You start burning fewer calories, you become more economical, and then what's called the constrained energy model starts to take over, whereby compensation, you go and bust your ass in the gym, and then you come home and you sit more and eat more. And that blows your calorie deficit out of the water, and it also causes you to lose your non-exercise activity thermogenesis benefit. So now you've got kind of a right pocket, left pocket thing going on. I'm going to train really hard for 30 minutes, and I'm going to sit around all day. I'd rather you did an exercise that rejuvenated you, something that wasn't quite as fatiguing. Maybe just the ideal stimulus for hypertrophy, getting into the gym and lifting weights, and we can take a deeper dive into what that is. And then stay active throughout the day. That's what I would prefer. Stay on your feet. Get your 8,000 plus steps. Track it. Because when you're dieting, you tend to downregulate non-exercise activity. You find that your step count starts to decrease over time. And just because in a calorie deficit, you're going to have a little less energy. You're going to be a little more tired. So we can dive into those a little better and how to achieve the most optimal way to achieve a calorie deficit and the most optimal way to create the best hypertrophy stimulus. But that's the big picture there. And of course, I didn't mention sleep, and anybody who's ever heard from me knows that that's the foundation upon which everything sits. And you're going to need sufficient sleep in order to build muscle and burn fat. And the less sleep that you get, the more stingy your body becomes with fat. And you'll end up burning muscle and saving fat if you don't get sufficient sleep. So we'll just set that aside as an obvious goal to get 7+ hours of quality sleep.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. We're definitely going to unpack all four of those. And, the sleep conversation, that was kind of where we were at the last time. That was right after you kind of had that viral clip where you had said, I'd rather you sleep than wake up at 4 a.m. and do the cardio. And I kind of, we unpacked that there a little bit, the stepping over pennies to pick up dollars, no, stepping over dollar bills to pick up pennies kind of quote. I love that. And I think so many people have these four components almost flipped upside down. I have so many friends, it's like their highlight of the day is sharing on social media, like their 1 hour tracker. It's like they burned 600 calories in a workout. And I'm sure you and I both would agree that those measurements truly aren't that accurate most of the time. You see a lot of people get caught up too much in like, what am I doing during the workout, and really missing out on some of these other components.
Yeah, and you opened up this conversation talking about the average 30-something-year-old individual who's an intermediate trainer. And your specific reference there to the daily tracker and the 600 calorie burn, that's a unique individual. That's the 1%. That's the folks that love doing that. And I find that most people don't really love to go bust their ass in the gym. And I have to find out a way to create a stimulus that works, that's also sustainable and enjoyable. So they'll do it long term, because that's the biggest problem, is that folks start these programs and don't adhere to them long term. I call it, as we've discussed before, compliance is the science. And consistency is more important than intensity for the average individual, which is most people. I don't want to belittle folks by calling them average, but most of us aren't fitfluencers that spend their life in the gym.
Yeah, and that's going to be the vast majority that either find this on the audio side or even on even on the YouTube. That's the people that are going there to kind of get what's the best training program, or what's the best nutrition plan.
I do it. You know it. I used to do that with Consumer Reports. I would type in best this, best that, and then they started charging for that information. So,
well, it's great we're able to give this away for free. But kind of circling all the way back to, I think the first thing you said, it was controlling the calories. So if we're talking about, the ideal foods, or, I know you're not, a real advocate of like attaching yourself too much to a specific diet, but for this average individual that is looking to, once again, lose body fat, gain muscle, we'll get into the training side of things a little bit later on, what should they be prioritizing in terms of their macronutrients?
Yeah, let's start with the big picture, and we'll get down to the details. The big picture is the best diet's the one you'll follow. And I think as mentioned earlier, the number one problem with dieting is most people who go on a diet lose weight, but most people regain the weight.
It's about 95%, right?
Well, 50% after the first year, and then it starts to climb to 70, 90% after years 2 or 3. We see in the long-term diet trials, comparing placebo to semaglutide, the weight loss medications, over 2 years, that the average weight loss maintenance over a 2-year time period is a 2% weight loss in the general population. Whereas on the medications, it was anywhere from 17 to 23%, depending on which medication. So the point being, without getting distracted on the medication, is that on average, people only are able to maintain about 2% weight loss. And that's on average, understanding that individuals within that study, there's a lot of inter-individual variability. Some people gain significantly more than they lose. Others lose more weight than that. But there's a whole range, and I'm just saying on average. It's difficult to adhere to a diet long-term. That's one of the biggest challenges we have. I've said in my obesity rant some 6-7 years ago, it's about changing behavior. That's a lot more difficult. Than just working out or what have you. So calories are king. There's no question. And you need to maintain a calorie deficit in order to lose weight. And there's many paths to that destination. I said the best diet's the one you'll follow. If a keto diet allows you to adhere to that diet and allows you to lose weight and maintain a calorie deficit, then that's the best diet for you, the one that feels the least restrictive. If it's intermittent fasting, if it's paleo, if it's Mediterranean, if it's continuous calorie restriction, tracking your diet, your calories. I should say there's really only 3 ways to lose weight, what we call CR, DR, and TR. Calorie restriction is where you weigh and measure your food. That's one way to track your food and make sure you stay in a deficit. That's CR, calorie restriction. Dietary restriction, DR, is where you eliminate certain foods. That's your keto group, eliminate carbs. That's your vegan group. It's your carnivore group. Whatever you eliminate, paleo, everything a caveman didn't eat. If you choose to eliminate things from your diet, you're undergoing some form of dietary restriction. And that can be effective for weight loss, presuming it allows you to maintain a calorie deficit and you can adhere to it. It doesn't feel restrictive to you. You don't binge or overeat or relapse. The other one is TR, that's time restriction. That's your intermittent fasting, whether you do a 16-8 or a 24 or an alternate day fast or multiple day fastings. It all falls under that same category. Those are your three options. That's all there are. Every single diet that's ever been invented, including the vertical diet, falls under one of those three categories. The vertical diet tends to focus on continuous calorie restriction. We track calories. I ask for pictures of the meals and to use MyFitnessPal so that you can actually keep track of everything that you consume. So you pick one of those three paths or a combination thereof. We have the keto intermittent fast group. Remember those guys that, even notable people like Dr. Peter Attia was a big fan of both of those at one time. And he's since moved past that era and has evolved to understand that it is just calories, and however you are able to meet that requirement or restriction, it's whatever best suits you for your lifestyle and you can adhere to long term, then have at it. And I'm not going to argue one being better than the other. If we wanted to talk specifically about performance, I would make some arguments as to the deficiencies of a keto or intermittent fasting diet with respect to top performance for the one percenters. But generally speaking, whether you eat 2 meals a day or 6 meals a day, when you control for calories and protein, there's no difference in weight loss or body composition between any of those dietary choices. And I think that's a good thing. I'm not trying to insult anybody's diet plan. I'm trying to say that you have options, you have choices. And that way people don't feel as though if they failed on a particular diet that they thought was the best or the only way, they understand that just doesn't work for them, and they can find an alternate plan. So calories are king. And then you mentioned macros, and I talked about protein. You control for calories and protein. Protein's important. Protein does have a couple of pretty significant benefits. One I talked about earlier was the thermic effect of food. For every 100 calories of protein you consume, you net out about 70. So it's just, you get more foods with fewer calories. So, plus protein obviously supports lean tissue, which is, we're focused on fat loss, not muscle loss. And so we want to get sufficient protein to support lean tissue, which from the bulk of the research and the evidence out there seems to be about 1.6 grams of protein per pound of lean weight. So a lean 200-pound person might only need about 160 grams of protein. There's a reason why you might consume more, and that's the third benefit of protein, and that's it's very satiating. And people who are very lean, or people who are older and have anabolic resistance, or people who are trying to diet and have a hard time controlling their hunger, those are all three great reasons where you might eat more protein, 1 gram per pound or 1.2 grams per pound. There's no evidence that protein has any adverse health effects in those higher amounts. That's from the ISSN. They've done protein overfeeding studies up to 2 and even 3 grams per pound and haven't seen any adverse. That's Dr. Jose Antonio. Hasn't seen any adverse effects for high protein intakes in terms of kidney or liver or anything like that. So you don't need it, but it may be beneficial in a calorie deficit for those reasons mentioned: lean mass retention, satiety, thermic effect of food. So once you've controlled for calories and protein, now you've got carbs and fats. And from the DietFits trial out of Stanford, over 600 participants tracked for a year, they found that it didn't really matter. High protein or high carb, low carb, high fat, low fat, it didn't matter. And really the best diet was the one that you could adhere to. So if you prefer more fats, then eat more fats. If you prefer more carbs, eat more carbs. It becomes the one that becomes a lifestyle that you enjoy. And I know there are people out there that try and purvey the carbohydrate insulin model. We've heard that if you raise your insulin, that you can't burn fat. It's patently false. It's been proven over and over again, as the DietFits trial proved. There was no difference in glycemic index as well. So the carbohydrate insulin model, which is still popular, unbelievable to me because we have so many human randomized controlled trials showing that high carb or low carb or high fat or low fat has equivalent outcomes, health outcomes, fat loss outcomes, blood sugar outcomes, that it's really, I don't know why it's still argued. And generally it's not argued amongst the domain-specific nutrition professionals, those with PhDs in nutrition. It's argued amongst chiropractors and journalists and other, cardiologists who don't have any nutrition training. And they've been called out over and over again on social media. Dr. Jason Fung is an example of one who's a carbohydrate insulin model guy. Dr. Gary Taub's book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, was based on that. I think Nina Teicholz, what's hers, I forget the name of her book, but same thing. I think these are all carbohydrate insulin model people. More recently, I think Eddie Abu has been very popular recently, talking about you eat sugar, wake the fuck up. And as long as he's swearing and speaking with loudly and with confidence, people tend to listen to him. But the fact is the research doesn't support it. So I don't mean to belabor the point, but it doesn't matter for the general population that we're speaking to. In terms of performance, I would prefer to keep the fats a little lower and put more carbs in because you want to fuel workouts. I would also say this as an aside in terms of general health. We do have compelling evidence, multiple converging lines of evidence with epidemiology, with human randomized controlled trials, and now the genetic Mendelian randomization research showing that higher saturated fat diets will, for a significant portion of the population, increase LDL cholesterol, which is an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Not the only risk factor, but an independent risk factor. And so I would recommend keeping saturated fats under 10% of total calories and getting blood tests to find out just how sensitive you are to ApoB and LDL elevations. So I can't make specific recommendations for fats and carbs for the general population. I just want to say that it's for your personal preference as long as your calories are under control and your protein's sufficient. And to eat now, we've done calories, we've done macros. The next step is going to be micronutrients, and those should be sufficiently satisfied if you get most of your food from whole food sources and have a variety of foods. It can be a lean proteins, lean red meats, chicken, fish, salmon would be preferable because of the omega-3s. Egg white blends if you're trying to control fats, but certainly eggs can be helpful. Dairy, another fantastic one. Stu Phillips, McMaster University, just put forth some good research on dairy showing it has an independent effect on BMI, on body composition, and performance. And so dairy is a good one, particularly yogurt, because it's fermented, is really good for the digestive system. Again, the Sonnenberg trials out of Stanford showed that 100% of the population of the participants in their studies who used fermented foods had an improvement in diversity and density of their microbiome. So their gut health was improved. Whereas when they did fiber, they found a third of the group had adverse results to fiber because their claim was that they probably had compromised microbiome already, and so they couldn't digest that much fiber. But fiber is still, from all the research, suggests that fiber is beneficial for digestion and for long-term health for those people who can tolerate the fibers, which, my diet talks specifically about types of fibers that might aggravate certain people, the FODMAPs. And I don't know if I should say this last or if we already talked about it first, but knowing now that the calories are king and how to break down your macronutrients and to get sufficient micronutrients from a variety of whole unprocessed foods, you're back to compliance is the science. You're back to how can I adhere to a deficit so I don't get hungry? And that takes us into a conversation about satiety, the types of foods that keep you full. We mentioned protein, we mentioned fiber. There's also a satiety index that rates foods based on people's perception of hunger after they've consumed them. And you can just Google satiety index and see that real high on that list is foods like boiled potatoes and oranges. Certainly high protein and high fiber foods are on there as well. But that's something that I try and utilize satiety. I have a kind of a satiety toolkit. I give people tips on how to stay full, how to replace hyper-palatable, ultra-processed, nutrient-dense foods with more satiating foods in your kitchen, like getting rid of the ice cream and bringing in fat-free Greek yogurt and strawberries or blueberries. Those kinds of swaps need to be there to help with compliance so that you don't end up overeating your snack foods and keep those other things out of the house. It's not to say they can't be a small part of a balanced diet plan, but it should be onerous in order for you to obtain them. They shouldn't be right there handy. And you should have an alternative, whether it's popcorn or the Greek yogurt or some other alternative that's lower calorie, that's more satiating, that you can sit there and munch on out of habit when you're not really hungry, but you're just, passing some time in front of Netflix at night.
Yeah, and that goes back to making this a sustainable lifestyle, right? It's like, are you really going to go the rest of your life not enjoying some of those foods, but plan them out, be structured in how you do that? Maybe when you're going to have a dessert, have it as a meal out. I don't know if you're somebody that likes to use the word cheat food, right? But, if you just eliminate the things, you keep them out of the house, it's going to be a lot harder. You're not going to drive to the convenience store at 11 o'clock at night. Maybe you would, but then you got another thing you might want to address there a little bit.
Then you got to get back on the horse the next day, but at least that you're less likely to. And that's kind of all we're trying to leverage here is there's going to be anytime you're in a calorie deficit, there's going to be some hunger. We just have to try and make it manageable and have some sort of alternatives. Another thing is in terms of convenience, as you know, I talk about meal prepping a lot. And it's not to shill for my meal prep company, but I partnered with a big national company to manufacture and distribute my meals for me, the vertical diet meals that I sell as part of meal prep, mostly because I wanted them and I wanted my clients to have access to them because it's just convenient if you have something, like you say, in the fridge that you can throw in the microwave that meets your calories and macros and micros, and it tastes good, it's convenient and it tastes good. Then meal prepping is a fantastic idea, and you can do it yourself. I talk about ways to cook like the Monster Mash, and to put it in a thermos, and to have a hot meal ready for you that'll stay hot for 8 hours or more. If you need to leave the house in the morning, you're not going to be back till dinner. Those are difficult opportunities to end up at a Carl's Jr. as opposed to maybe you've got your own, an orange and a Monster Mash in a hot thermos that you can just stop and eat. And now you haven't, blown your calorie budget out and you're on your plan still.
Yeah, what is it? They say failure to plan is essentially planning to fail. I know my experience, as a competitive bodybuilder, like that entire world is built around the meal preparation. And really the only way I've been able to sustain, a somewhat decent physique. I don't look like I did when I was in my competing years, but still walk around at probably, sub 12% body fat. I allow myself to enjoy different things here and there, but it's relying on meal prep companies. I've used your company in the past. I have a local company here now that we've partnered with, which literally drops them at my door. They're fresh made that same day. And that's the only thing that's been able to me. I've never been somebody that can track the meals. I don't enjoy plugging things into an app. I'm like, just send me the meals and I can eat them when I need to eat. And that's what's worked for me. But I think it's about, I think like you said, I think too many people feel disempowered to be their own case study for themselves. I'm glad you kind of, called out some of the social media influencers out there that are, very polarizing, fear mongering. How should people kind of manage or even understand who it is they're getting information from?
Well, that's hard. I understand that because popular people, even credentialed individuals, I mentioned Dr. Jason Fung, he's an MD. There are some great resources. Domain-specific credentialed professionals in nutrition are people like Dr. Lane Norton, people like Dr. Alan Flanagan, people like, I believe it's Eric Trexler with Mass Research Review. There's other great ones. Alan Aragon has a research review. I subscribe to all of these guys and read all their research and watch their videos. And what's great about them is they will debunk these people. Dr. Idz has done a great job recently, Dr_IDZ, Dr. Idz, and they're enjoyable to watch. He's one of those who will stitch somebody else's claim, and then he'll come on and show why it's not evidence-based and show the science. And I got to be honest with you, I saw this trend coming somewhere damn near 10 years ago. Because Lane Norton has been doing Fuckery Friday for a long time. And I didn't want to be on that show. I consider my platform I take it with great responsibility. I try and provide good information. I partnered with a PhD RDN who is director of dietetics at UNLV and an instructor in their exercise phys department, Dr. Damon McCune. And he's the co-author of The Vertical Diet. And I partnered with him intentionally to go through every single claim or recommendation I was making to make sure it was science-based information. I've stepped on a few landmines over the years. I've been, rightfully so, criticized for a couple of my positions some many years ago. It's a learning opportunity, and as has Lane Norton. He used to believe things that he doesn't currently believe, as does Dr. Peter Attia. As I mentioned, he's evolved. I think Thomas DeLauer has done a great job recently. Thomas DeLauer has evolved. And he's interviewed a lot of people recently who have said things that I used to believe that I no longer believe. Those are great episodes. Those are some of my favorites. The people from Barbell Medicine do a great job, mostly with training and pain rehabilitation, but they're pretty solid on nutrition as well. But Dr. Andy Galpin. So I'm going through and naming names of people that might not be as well known. Certainly Alan Flanagan from A-Linea Nutrition isn't very popular, but he's probably at the top of that pack in terms of his knowledge and his ability to decipher research. He's a PhD who used to be an attorney. He's a Mensa level genius. The guy's brilliant to listen to, not just in nutrition, but in history and a whole host of other topics. But these are the people I follow. These are the people I subscribe to. These are the newsletters I read. These are the videos I watch. And I watch all of the other people, too, to listen to them say stupid stuff and watch them get debunked. But I guess to continue on what I was saying, I saw that trend some many years ago with Lane Norton's and other people calling folks out on social media. And I didn't want to be that guy. And now I watch people getting called out on social media, and I cringe a little bit. There, but for the grace of God go I. There's things I've said in videos some many years past that I don't necessarily agree with today. And I would hate for somebody to pull up an old video and critique me without the proper amount of nuance. And so I went back to school. I enrolled in courses at UNLV. I got my CSCS from the NSCA and partnered with Damon and wrote the book with over 200 references to videos, articles, and peer-reviewed research to make sure that I supported all of my claims with evidence. And so I'm trying to make sure I navigate this minefield, but it's a bit discouraging to me to see people, you could say, get called out, but get corrected, and correctly so, and be supplied the evidence as to why they're wrong, and then to have them double down and just delete the comments and continue saying stupid stuff. At that point, all bets are off. They deserve to be exploited on the internet. And I think there's other examples. Gundry and his claims about lectins. You've got Lustig and his claims about fructose. None of those things are evidence-based, and they've been debunked many times. There's a good website called redpenreviews.org, and I think they employ about 7 PhD nutritionist researchers who they go and grab all of the or some of the most popular New York Times bestsellers that are written by mostly MDs and some journalists and some chiropractors. But they make a lot of claims about nutrition that aren't factually based, and they actually rank their claims. They look up all of the research pertaining to the claims or that they reference and determine whether or not it actually supports their claims, and they'll give them a percentage of accuracy. And a lot of these people, their books are very, very poor in terms of accuracy, healthfulness, but they do a good job. They have a ranking system. And some of them are down in like the 18 to 25 percentile for scientific accuracy of their claims. And it can kind of open your eyes really quickly to, historically you may have felt as though somebody's credentials were enough to allow them, to convince you of certain things, whereas it's not their domain. And people come from outside the nutrition community and make comments about nutrition who are painfully wrong. I mean, it happened most recently with Gary Brecka and Dana White about these 7-day fasts, reducing cancer risk by 70%, which is just patently false. But they're making very bold claims. Another one recently was Dr. Jordan Peterson even came out and said something about the U.S. dietary guidelines being bad information. Nobody follows the guidelines. The guidelines are great. Lean protein, fruits and vegetables, not too much sugar. The diet guidelines are great. They're consistent with those of many other countries around the world, most other countries around the world. but nobody's following them. So the idea that somehow we followed the guidelines and got fatter is horseshit, because nobody followed the guidelines. We kept eating too much of junk food and fast food, and that's not part of the guidelines. So he was, I think rightfully so, Lane Norton called out and said, look, we love you, Jordan Peterson. You're a smart guy. You're a brilliant guy. Don't comment on things that are outside your area of expertise. And same with Dana White. Lane Norton called him out and said, look, I love the UFC. You do a fantastic job. But, stay in your lane. Don't be talking about things you have no particular expertise in. So trying to navigate that for the average individual whose feed is probably more populated by popular people than experienced or knowledgeable people, that's difficult. And I hope that some of the information that I just went through can provide them a foundation for navigating this.
Yeah, and that's why I have you here, because these aren't the sexy things, and it is sometimes, and it disheartens people, right? Because they hear some of these claims and then they can't live up to it. And, the challenge even with, finding some of these foods, or, how do we fit this into a budget? And just today's economy can be challenging as well. So it's like, then they begin to get disheartened. And I've seen this the same thing in the gym with like unexperienced trainers, right? You walk into big box gyms, you got the 18-year-old kid that played high school football, takes a weekend certification. Then he's got the 85-year-old guy doing tricep extensions and leg extensions. Like, that dude just needs to be moving, squatting, carrying some things around, and people get hurt. And then it completely destroys their relationship to the gym. And now you've just lost somebody for the rest of their life. They're like, screw that. I can't win because I hired a quote unquote professional and I just got more hurt. I didn't see the results. The same thing happens with some of these social media influencers. It's like, if I can't live up, if I don't have $100,000 to spend on a morning routine like somebody like Dana White, does that mean that I can't have success in doing these things? So it's just so disheartening. And that's why I love you and Lane. Like you said, he's the OG. Shout out to Lane, local here. We actually share a barber, Jose Executive Barber Studio in Tampa. Shout out there. But he's great, man. And he's real. And I think what you talked about is like your evolution, your understanding of these things evolve over time. Ultimately, isn't that what science is? It's trying to get us closer and closer to the truth. We're never really going to be able to reach all of it. We're always going to be understanding new things. We'll have better studies. We'll have better tools to study some of these things. It's like, we can't stay so stuck on like, this is the only way. We got to use these resources, be our own case studies, build a lifestyle, tweak certain things, but ultimately have people feel empowered. And I think that's what I'm trying to do here, is just empower people that, hey, here's the information. Now go run with it and make it your own.
Exactly. Listen to the experts and, take those things that work for you and put them in your toolbox, and those things that don't work for you, discard them and move on. I don't agree with 100% of what anyone says, and I don't ask everyone to agree with me, but you should certainly seek information and then try it. Hopefully it's good information. You provided a great segue out of the diet realm and into the gym with your description of the 18-year-old personal trainer with the weekend certification. I guess we've talked a little bit about sleep. We've talked plenty about nutrition. We should get to the exercise portion of this stool. And much like in nutrition, I said the best diet's the one you'll follow. The best exercise is the one you'll do. The same thing applies here, and it has to be something that you enjoy, that fits with your lifestyle. We're talking about, again, the average individual for whom the priority is work and family, and a host of other obligations, and that the training is really an extracurricular activity. It's a hobby for most people. I think that it's very important to exercise. I did a video called Rhino's Rant, called Stress for Success, where I spoke about a moment in my past where a brief time where I didn't exercise. I had stopped competing in 1997, and I started a business, and I was burning the candle at both ends, as many of us have done to build our companies over the years. And I was not sleeping very much. I was not a member at a gym. I wasn't exercising, and I was eating pretty crappy fast food all the time, just as a matter of convenience and cost to focus on my business. And I went to the library. I felt so terrible. I was just miserable. I was suffering from insomnia and stress and a whole host of other problems. I went to the library to try and look for some stress coping mechanisms, right? And I wanted to read a book on how to manage stress. And I picked up a book by Jim Lohr called Stress for Success. And I opened the book and started reading through it. And you know what it primarily was about? It was about optimizing your sleep, eating a healthy diet, and exercising. There was very little in there about, like breathing techniques and meditation. And I was looking for some hack. And in fact, there is no hack. It's the basics that we're discussing now. So exercise definitely has to become a part of a successful and healthy lifestyle to benefit your business and your marriage and all that as well, and your kids. So how much time do you have? That's what you got to find out. You got to actually set aside an amount of time that you can commit consistently to your physical health. That's why I like the 10-minute walks, because they're sustainable. You can do them anytime, anywhere. Little exercise snacks, eat a meal, take a walk. Eat a meal, take a walk. It's just 10 minutes. You do 3 of those a day, and you're getting 210 minutes a week, which well exceeds the American Heart Association's recommendation of 150 minutes a week. And it could be a brisk walk, or you can get on a recumbent bike if the weather is bad, like Hafthor does in his garage in Iceland when the snow is bad. But just moving your body, and we see now that moving more frequently, 3 10-minute walks a day, or 10-minute bouts of modest exercise, is better than one 30-minute bout of exercise at the end of the day. It seems that it doesn't undo all the sedentary behavior from sitting. And so I would encourage the exercise snacks more so than that one bout of cardio at the end of the day. Now we're on to weight training for lean mass retention. The muscle is an endocrine organ, and it helps release a lot of anti-inflammatory processes throughout the body. Obviously, it helps with not just longevity, but lifespan, but health span. We're seeing everybody talk about this now. Dr. Peter Attia and many, many others are focused on strength and lean mass retention, especially into your later years. Sarcopenia as you age. I talked about anabolic resistance from your body's inability to absorb as much protein as you age. And even protein consumption isn't nearly as effective as the stimulus for muscle protein synthesis of lifting weights. We see that even in people with lower protein diets, so long as they're lifting weights, they can maintain their lean mass. So lifting is essential. Now I have to bridge the gap between people who don't necessarily like to lift or go to the gym, and try and find some way to load your body, whether it's push-ups or dips on 2 chairs or air squats, are sufficient. You can progress them to a point until you run out of resistance with your body weight, or whatever bands you can utilize at home. But I actually enjoy the gym, which again I'm careful to state that that's not everybody's preference. So when I get a client that comes into the gym, my first goal is, can I make this fun? Can I make this something they look forward to? I teach a kids' power hour at Sin City Iron in Las Vegas every Sunday. And I tell my own kids when I take them to the gym, what's the most important thing, today when we go to the gym? And they already know the answer. It's to have fun. I'm not in there trying to crush them, or, I want to teach them some things, and most certainly, but I want them to come back next week. I want them to want to come back. And so if your trainer is in there with blowing their whistle and having you do battle ropes and burpees, and you're sweating hard and breathing hard, and you feel like you got a good workout, but it's onerous and not enjoyable, the likelihood you're going to do that consistently long term is pretty poor. And as mentioned earlier, in terms of compensation, I don't think it's the best recommendation to do a hard battle ropes and burpees kind of workout, because you'll go home and sit more and eat more, and you'll be tired. Some people may enjoy that, and that's I let them lead the way on that. So I take them around the gym, and I try and find exercises that they enjoy that provide some resistance. It might not be a squat and a deadlift. It might be a leg extension and a standing leg curl. I try and find things that they'll actually enjoy doing. And I ask them, how do you like that? How does it feel? And then one of the most important things I do is I try almost right out of the gate, within the first 2 workouts, let them see a strength improvement. Whether it's a trap bar deadlift, because most people can accommodate that, and it does, unlike a regular deadlift, there's some barrier in terms of coordination or what have you. Trap bar deadlifts are a great example. It's axial loading, so it's great for the spine and for bone mineral density, for, like you said, for older individuals. And if they can't reach down to the high handles on a trap bar, then we can just set one on a support racks on a squat rack and just have them do even a partial deadlift. Here's the great thing about that exercise is whatever you do the first day, when you come back 3 or 4 days later and do it again, you'll be stronger. You'll be able to lift 1 more rep or 5 more pounds. That's the addiction. That's the hook for your clients, is if you can show them progress. They're not going to see muscle gain in the mirror for months. But if you can show them a strength gain in just 1 week, that's, I think, is the hook. That's why a lot of CrossFit women have crossed over into powerlifting competitions, because it's so measurable and progressible. And you and I both know it's a neural adaptation. At least initially. They're just more coordinated from having practiced the movements, and they learn to recruit the muscles. And we both know that, at least for the first 4 to 6 weeks. It's not necessarily a strength gain. They just more coordinated. But I'll play on that. I'll use that to my advantage to advance their trap bar deadlift by 50 pounds in 4 weeks. And they'll tell all their family and friends about how strong they're getting, and actually be motivated to continue on that program. And I use that same theory with every exercise. I measure it and I progress it over time, and I record it and write it down so they can see. How do you measure battle ropes and burpees? How do you measure sweating and breathing hard? You can go get a VO2 max test or, what have you, but along with not being necessarily enjoyable and sustainable, it's not very measurable. And so the individual has a hard time quantifying that. And being motivated by it. So that would be my first and foremost. Find something you enjoy, set a schedule, and there's no best schedule. It's when you're most likely to go to the gym. People always want to know what's the best split. And I'm like, well, the one you'll attend, whether it's training every other day or whether it's a full body workout or upper one day, lower the next, it doesn't matter. And there's no scientific evidence to suggest that one is better than the other. Attendance is what's most important, consistency over intensity, at least initially, and to get yourself kind of immersed into that environment. Hopefully you got a friend or a spouse or a family member that wants to come to the gym with you, or you get a personal trainer, so you have somebody to hold you accountable that you have to meet there. Those kinds of things help you comply. And once I get them in to train regularly, now I can start focusing more on the progression, the intensity, how close to failure are you going on a particular set, and that would start to lend itself better to long-term results in terms of hypertrophy.
I love the trap bar deadlift. I talk a lot about it on the show. I have a great relationship with my nephew. He's 13 years old, stud of an athlete, got big dreams, big hopes. He's going into 8th grade. He's been practicing and working with the high school team and get incredible kid, but I started working out with him last summer. He was 12 years old. Finally was able to get him into the gym. I'm like, this is going to be our number one focus, is getting you strong and improving in this lift. By the second week, my sister, his mom, started to see just like his overall improvement just in life. Like with a movement like that, like you have carryover effects to like how you feel in the everyday life. My sister, who's been a group fitness junkie for her entire life, said, hey, I want to start coming with you as well. Got her into the trap bar deadlift, started progressing over that. That's got so many carryovers for the dads out there. That's going to help you play with your kids. You're going to be able to pick them up off the ground, be able to move a whole lot better. You'll feel better getting up out of bed in the morning. You'll feel better just getting up out of your chair. Like, it's got such carryover to every single part of your life. So I'm glad you really kind of drove that point home right there. I want to maybe circle back to the training here a little bit, but going back to that initial question. So that guy that's, early to mid 30s, overweight, hasn't really been trained his entire life. I'm assuming, just based on the world that we live in today, the data shows that men's hormone levels are in the tanks. This guy's probably maybe suffering from some low T. How important is for him to get that optimized first, or will some of these dietary changes have carryover effects, or does he need to get that optimized to really be able to get the benefits from what we're talking about here?
Man, you are all over it, brother. That's another excellent transition to the fourth leg of the stool. We talked about sleeping, we talked about eating, and we talked about training. The next component to that is going to be your medical status. It's going to be your blood testing and whatever necessary hormonal interventions you may need to optimize your fitness, or medication if you've got high blood pressure or low thyroid, hypogonadism, testosterone. whether or not you're going to need to do some sort of medical intervention for abnormally high familial hypercholesterolemia. You get a blood test for that. Look at your lipids if your LDLs are out of whack. You said something interesting there. Do we intervene first with the medical, or does some of the lifestyle help with those problems? I believe you start with lifestyle. I believe you get a blood test first. Let's get a baseline. Let's figure out where you're at. And so that we know whatever we're doing, we can measure whether or not it's having the necessary effect. So blood test is first. And then I said this in my Iceland seminar some 7 years ago. It's got almost 7 million views now, where I went up to Iceland and Hafthor Bjornsson did a presentation up there. It's 2 hours long. I go over every detail of the vertical diet. And as I mentioned, there's some things in there I would probably deliver differently, but it was a specific audience of bodybuilders, powerlifters, and strongmen. But I said, look, hormones have a huge impact on your ability to lose weight, say your hypothyroidism, on your ability to gain muscle, whether it's hypogonadism, and then just general health. So get the blood test, and then start to implement a lifestyle plan. Reduce the saturated fat, reduce your calories, get some weight loss, exercise regularly. Start with the walks and a couple of visits to the gym a week. Try and optimize your sleep, and now we're talking sleep apnea. If that's another medical consideration, if you're holding your breath and snoring at night and waking up tired, you might have some degree of apnea, and that's an intervention that is most likely benefited from weight loss. So you might try lifestyle first there as well. But if you can't remedy apnea, that'll have a huge impact on your blood pressure, on your blood sugars, on your energy levels, and you may need to get a CPAP to resolve your sleep apnea. Go hard for 30 to 60 days, and be consistent, trying to optimize your sleep and your nutrition and lose some body fat. I said on the Tom Bilyeu podcast that 95% of health benefits are realized strictly from weight loss itself, irrespective of diet. And I was skewered on social media for it, but it is a fact, and it's researched very well. And I said I would never recommend the McDonald's diet, but even with the McDonald's diet, we see improvements in biomarkers like blood pressure and blood sugar and lipids from weight loss. And I would not recommend the McDonald's diet for a number of reasons. Hard to comply with in terms of satiety, micronutrient deficiencies, potentially high in saturated fat, ultra-processed foods, etc. But if you can lose weight on any diet, you can realize health outcome improvements. So try and lose the weight, try and sleep a little better, try and exercise consistently, and then get another blood test 60 days later. And look at the markers that were out of range that you were concerned about. How much improvement did you realize from that intervention? And now if 60 days later or 90 days later, whatever time period it takes you to have a substantial change in your body weight, if you're 20, 30 pounds overweight, what we see in the literature is a 7% weight loss. It seems to be a pretty good initial driver of these health benefits. This is some of the research from the diabetes in particular. You can resolve about 50% of your NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver, and dramatically reduce your blood sugars. Of 15% weight loss. Now, this is what I tried to accomplish with some of my athletes. If they're 300 pounds and you lose 45 pounds, a 15% weight loss can reverse type 2 diabetes for those people who already don't have pancreatic failure. You can restore pancreatic beta cell function with about a 15% weight loss on average, irrespective of how you lose it, I hate to say. But that can be pretty dramatic. So plug that number in if you're particularly compromised in terms of your metabolic health from your excess body fat. If you have elevated HA1C, fasted blood glucose, fasted insulin, high triglycerides, that's a great number to shoot for. If you're a 300-pound person, lose 45 pounds. How long does that take? At 1 to 2% body fat loss per week. You're looking. You can do that in 60 days, thereabouts, 60, 90 days. So go hard on that. Make that your goal. Lose that 15% if you can get there. 7 would be great. Get a second blood test. Call it 90 days. See what's improved or hasn't improved. And if you still have hypothyroidism, you might need to see a doctor and find out if you've got Hashimoto's or if you have some autoimmune disease. If you still have low tests, you got to go in and have a doctor find out what type of testosterone deficiency you have and why. Remedying those problems does have a significant impact on your health markers. Thyroid has a huge impact on lipids. If your LDL is significantly elevated and your thyroid's, you've got high TSH, meaning low thyroid, fixing that could fix the LDL. If you've got low testosterone, fixing that, maybe you have to get on testosterone therapy, could have a significant effect on your lean body mass and your ability to have the energy to want to go to the gym. And so those things become rewarding and more likely for you to comply with long term. So those are just some primary, some preliminary examples. LDL would be the other major one, other than blood sugars and blood pressure and testosterone and thyroid. Some people are hyperabsorbers of cholesterol and may not be able to eat eggs. About 20% of the population will convert esterified cholesterol into blood cholesterol and raise LDL. And some people, from whether it's from familial hypercholesterolemia or from insufficient clearance of cholesterol or too much saturated fat consumption, reducing the LDL receptors in the liver, may recirculate cholesterol to such a degree that they've got elevated LDL or ApoB, and might have to eat even less saturated fat or avoid eggs or increase fiber or a combination of all of those. And if lifestyle doesn't work, then you may be a candidate, depending on your other risk factors, and maybe a CAC scan or a coronary angiography to look for soft plaque in the arteries. You may be a candidate for some medical intervention, which doesn't necessarily have to be statins, because we have ezetimibe is a cholesterol lowering medication that's not a statin. PCSK9 inhibitors are extraordinarily effective. They're not a statin. So if you have an aversion to try statins, but nowadays the statins have evolved to where they have a lot fewer side effects, and they can use low-dose combo therapy as recommended by Dr. Tom Dayspring. An ezetimibe rosuvastatin combination in very low dose, incredibly effective. Lane Norton has used, maybe is still using statins because he couldn't get his LDL down under 130. And he eats 60 grams of fiber a day. He's huge on fiber, and eats a low saturated fat diet. But genetically, he's just unable to get his LDL down. Dr. Soko, who's a PhD, exercise phys, Dr_SOKO on Instagram, uses a PCSK9 inhibitor and has his LDL cholesterol down in the 50s or 60s, similar to what you were when you were 8 to 12 years old. And we see evidence that with the Mendelian randomization, that people whose cholesterol is in the 50s and 60s and below, their ApoB in particular, never acquire atherosclerotic plaques, and will go their whole life without that being a potential factor for cardiovascular disease. So that may be a longer conversation, but I'm just saying that you hit on an important point. Get a blood test, use your lifestyle interventions, maximize those, get a subsequent test, see a doctor if you need medical intervention to address any of the other issues.
Yeah, it runs consistent with this entire conversation. Become your own case study. Look at yourself as a researcher of your own lifestyle. Have that data. Look at it over time. Compare it, realizing that these are going to be long-term, lasting lifestyle changes that we're aiming for. Nothing's going to happen overnight, but through these small tweaks, modifications, looking at the data, getting feedback, you can make sustainable, long-term progress with these. Touch on supplements here a little bit. Once again, knowing that none of them are going to be the one-all fix-all, but what are the kind of the recommended mandatory? Once again, speaking to that initial individual that we talked about at the beginning, right? Like what would be the recommendation in terms of overall supplements, and staying away from the snake oil salesman that some of the media influencers are kind of shilling out today.
There's a lot of that out there. I usually, as a subcategory under food, I put supplements and hydration, but they're very important, and I'll talk about them separately here. I'm going to talk about the legs on the stool, eat, sleep, train, and then blood testing and medication. And under eat, I address in my Vertical Diet ebook at great length proper hydration and supplementation. Supplements. You can get a blood test to show you if you're deficient in vitamin D. That's a very common deficiency, vitamin D25 hydroxy. And you can look at magnesium, although your blood will maintain its magnesium levels by stealing it from elsewhere. So sometimes it's hard to tell in serum whether or not you're magnesium deficient. But a lot of people are magnesium deficient. Those are the two big ones. They're hard to get from diet. Vitamin D3, hard to get from diet. Magnesium, kind of hard to get from diet. Those are two supplements that I put in kind of as a staple, or at least check your vitamin D3 status, maybe 2,000 IUs of vitamin D. When I was vitamin D deficient, I had to take 10,000 IUs for 3 months just to get my vitamin D from like 26 or so up to 50. Having said that, if you're in the normal physiological range with vitamin D, adding more vitamin D doesn't give you any additional benefit. And so I'm not a big fan of megadosing. We saw that in the Linus Pauling era where, he megadosed a host of things, vitamin A, et cetera, which actually led to an increased risk of certain health outcomes. So I'm not a megadosing fan. So 2,000 to 4,000 IUs of vitamin D3 a day I kind of put in, and then about 400 milligrams of magnesium a day. Bisglycinate is one that I like because it's highly absorbable and it doesn't cause diarrhea, or has less likely to, because magnesium can be a stool softener. And I put that in at dinner time because there seems to be some evidence it might help with sleep as well, but it's a small thing. And also, if we're going to talk about micronutrients, potassium and magnesium and calcium all help with blood pressure regulation. Significantly so, in such that the DASH diet trials that were intended to reduce sodium for blood pressure recognized that they had that the potassium increase, fruits and vegetables, 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day, probably had as protective effect as the sodium reduction. And so potassium is another big one that you can get from food that I don't supplement and wouldn't recommend supplementing. It can be hard on the lining of the stomach. And I think they limit it to 100 milligrams, and there can be some arrhythmia issues with overdosing potassium. Insufficient potassium could cause arrhythmia. And so we got to be cautious about probably using that as a dietary intervention, which I didn't mention under macronutrients, that when I go to carbs, I usually pick high potassium carbs first. A potato has twice the potassium of a banana, and fruit, yogurt. If you get those three in on a daily basis, you're gonna be pretty close to your potassium total, which is kind of hard to get. You got to be deliberate about it. Those are my two big vitamins. You can take a multivitamin if you wanted to satisfy all those requirements. I'd just be cautious that men don't take iron. We see more iron surplus in men than iron deficits. And men can't clear iron, and especially men on testosterone, they'll tend to, their iron will start to go up. And so that'll be one of the things that you test with your blood test, is make sure that your ferritin, your stored iron, isn't elevated. And women, on the other hand, they do lose iron. They end up oftentimes becoming anemic from their diets and their training and the menstrual period. And so we do recommend that they have a higher iron diet, which would be more red meat, lean red meats in the diet. And women tend to demonize red meat, and that can obviously result in lack of iron intake. And it kind of happens with those guru diets. So I talked about women get pretty restrictive, and they'll eat egg whites and protein powder and broccoli and whitefish, and end up not getting sufficient micronutrients, biotin from the yolk of the egg for skin, hair, and nails, and iron from the red meat, calcium from the dairy that they're demonizing. It's very common for women to demonize all of those foods. Fruits, women tend to demonize fruits because Eddie Abu told them that fruits are full of sugar, and you'll get fat, and you won't be able to, and you'll get diabetic. It's just tragic that people like him and the glucose goddess make these recommendations, and then people listen to them, and then they end up with health problems and micronutrient deficiencies. So women, we do like to see iron. Men, be cautious. My iron skyrocketed when I was using a cast iron pan a lot. It's just a cautionary note. If you don't know, if you don't get your blood test, but that's something that you should consider. And we don't want to over-donate either. If you're donating blood as a result of erythrocytosis from RBC, hemoglobin, hematocrit elevation from testosterone therapy, be careful not to overdonate. You might give yourself anemia, and then you'll be exhausted for however long it takes you to get your iron back up. So I throw all those in there. And then as far as performance supplements goes, protein powders, whey protein, it's just food in a can. If you get your 1.6 grams of protein from your food, then you don't need whey. But if it's convenient and it tastes good and it supplements or augments a meal, or if in the absence of a meal post-workout, if you're traveling or something, it's certainly an option. It's not magic. It doesn't do any better than the 1.6 grams of protein you can get from food, and so it isn't a performance enhancer in that regard. Creatine does seem to have some performance benefits, but I'll tell you, when you read Stu Phillips' review of all the creatine research, it becomes less and less compelling as to its long-term benefits for strength or hypertrophy, or even the cognitive benefits that people have been claiming lately. It'll soften your enthusiasm for it when you find how minimal the benefits are. It's not steroids, never will be, but there's no harm. I say that about a multivitamin too. What can I think it was the physician's study of over 40,000 men for 10 years or greater on multivitamins suggested that there was no long-term health benefits from taking a multivitamin or not taking a multivitamin. But the author of the study said, hey, what it doesn't cause any harm. What does it hurt? It's cheap. It might help some people who have deficiencies, but for the vast majority of the population, probably not measurable or meaningful in terms of long-term health. I'd say the same thing about, certainly about creatine. What can it hurt? It's pretty cheap. Creatine monohydrate. You don't need any special creatine, although I would say that some people do get gastric distress from creatine monohydrate and might opt for the creatine HCl if they felt as though it gave them a performance benefit, and that would be less, tends to cause less gastric distress. That's kind of it on supplements for me, to be honest with you. Omega-3s, if you're not eating sufficient salmon, which I try and get at least 2 or 3 5-ounce servings of salmon in a week, which would give you adequate omega-3s based on what the research suggests. And then, beyond that, I don't really have many supplement recommendations that aren't specific to somebody's diagnosed deficiency.
Yeah, no, of course. No. And I love there's no harm to it. There could be a placebo side effect, and it could, by having some of these things on a consistent basis, kind of have some of that buy-in built into it, right? In terms of these consistent lifestyle changes, right? It's like if I got, the pill counter sitting out every single morning and like I build that habit, then I'm more likely to kind of go to the gym. And because I did those 2 things, I'm less likely to maybe eat, the cake after dinner, right? So it's kind of maybe help on some of the behavioral change side of things, which I think brings up the next thing I wanted to maybe just kind of get your thoughts, or even if there's kind of research out there that you've discovered. But I guess in terms of like hiring, maybe once again, there's a lot of online coaches on there, not the greatest experts. A lot of them really work as accountability coaches these days, but we know, you need that kind of 63 to 90 day of consistent to make these real lasting changes. That's when, Dr. Caroline Leaf's research shows like that's when habits begin to form around 3 cycles of 21. So is there any benefit and value in your opinion of maybe bringing in an accountability coach or even partnering up and saying, hey, we're going to do these things together?
Yeah, you may need to get there. And some people that hire me say that. I just need somebody to be held accountable to. I think some people hire personal trainers just so they know that they have to go there and meet with it. They're paying for it. There's a buy-in there, right? There's skin in the game when you pay for something. I've given away a lot of information over the years. I've sat down at lunch and spoken with people for over an hour straight, giving away free information, only to turn around and find that they hired some other coach. And would come back to me later complaining, but then they would say, but I already paid for it, so I'm going to use the rest of the service because it's a, what do we call that, sunk cost fallacy? You've already paid for it, so you gotta get the value out of it. But no, this is fantastic. Your transitions again into compliance is the science. That's which gets measured, gets improved. So. I talked about some methods that I used for people to track things, whether it's a MyFitnessPal or what have you. I still, to this day, print out a piece of paper on my printer that's an Excel spreadsheet, and it has the days of the month across the top, and then it has all the things that I want to, on a daily basis, make sure that I've accomplished. And that's why I ask my clients to send me a picture of every meal they eat every day. When they sit down to eat, snap a picture, shoot it off to me. It takes you 1 second. And then there's some accountability there. It's not for my information as much as it is for theirs. There's some accountability there. Also something to reference back to if they have gastric distress or something like that, diarrhea. I can kind of look at the foods and we can maybe pinpoint what the problem is. But I also get a daily weight, and I'm looking at the average for the week, but I want them to weigh daily in order for me to be able to properly calculate that, especially for women because their weight fluctuates so much. that if I just have them weigh in weekly, that it can just blow their mind as to the, I dieted hard all week and I gained 3 pounds. And it's like, well, you trained legs yesterday, you had a high carb breakfast, and you're on your period. So, there you go. There's your water. And I have them give me their hours of sleep. And I write these things down on this piece of paper so I can glance at it, and at a glance I can see what my compliance looks like, and it just helps reiterate or remind me if my performance isn't where I think it needs to be. I can very plainly see why. I had a 5 hours sleep. I only got 2 meals yesterday instead of 4. Are you getting your walks in? So I actually track with a little tick marker whether I got my walks in. What I trained, if I trained upper or lower, because I do upper day off, lower day off. And if 4 days goes in, obviously it's not going to happen for me because I'm an addict on my training and I've been doing it for 30 years. But for the average individual, you might forget when you trained last or what you trained or how heavy your top sets were in your primary exercise, because we definitely want to progress those over time as we get more advanced and going down the road. I like to record, what those 2 top sets were in your first exercise and see that I can build on those over time. But you can quickly glance and say, well, I haven't trained in 5 days. And it's right there you see the blank, and it's compelling to you I got to get in, I got to get a workout in. So compliance is the science. If you need a life coach to help you create, to hold you accountable or help create methods that help you with that, my method is to print that out. My method is to have the thermoses with my meals in them already. My method is to take a 10-minute walk after each meal. When you attach a new behavior to an existing habit, which is eating, it's kind of like after dinner you brush your teeth, or before bed you brush your teeth. Those are habits now, and that's why I like the 10-minute walk. I wake up in the morning, I take a 10-minute walk. I go pee and I walk. I don't pass go. I don't collect $200. I don't do anything else. I don't open my phone. I know that is something that I will do every single morning, and then at night before bed I'll make sure and take a walk. And then if opportunity presents itself throughout the day, I don't particularly enjoy spending 40 minutes on a treadmill or any cardio for that matter. So the 10-minute walks I will do. And whether it's a rowing machine or your elliptical or your aerobics class, the 10-minute walks I'll do. So I've as a meathead powerlifter, I've done 30 to 40 minutes of cardio every day for well over 10 years since I've been talking about these. And people consider me to be the anti-cardio guy, and I'm not that at all. I do more than what's expected. I just do it in that form. I don't like the traditional treadmill or bicycle at the gym. I do it in 10-minute walks. So that's a hack, I suppose you could say. It's a way for you to get in those steps or that cardio training in what I think I've heard on the internet one time somebody referred to as exercise snacks. And as mentioned earlier, actually the more frequently that you move, the better. Particularly for largely sedentary people or people who have desk jobs, getting up for 5 minutes an hour. They had the same benefit from doing 10 air squats once an hour, same benefit on blood sugar regulation, 10 air squats once an hour throughout the day, as there was to going and doing 30 minutes of cardio at the gym at the end of the day. So which would you prefer? Pick your poison, So those are just recommendations that I would make. And as you said, compliance is the science. That which gets measured gets improved. That's why I ask for a text from all of my clients every day with their hours of sleep, their morning body weight, and a picture of each meal that they eat. And then once a week, we'll do a check-in with a waist measurement and a progress picture and talk about how their strength is progressing.
I love your whole approach and philosophy on just the simplicity of creating these lasting habits, right? I mean, my entire field of work these days is in behavioral change, working in the addiction space, right? And it is these small little things, but you figured out a way to, like you said, you attach a new behavior to an existing habit and you're much more likely to keep it. I love the exercise snacks. I recommend a lot of young men, get a dog, right? You're forced now to at least get 2-3, 10-minute walks per day. Like you got to take care of them. And it's a great, once again, kind of small hack. Speaking of these hacks, is there any value any value that we get or benefit from some of these current kind of biohacks? And at what point do we kind of introduce things like sauna, cold plunge, cold shower, like in terms of the bigger picture things? Like, is it if you can, if you enjoy it, do it. It's not going to have, the biggest impact, or what's your kind of overall thoughts on just this existing? I mean, because it's blown up, right? And it's just become the biggest buzz that it's the life-changing thing, and I love it, right? I did a cold plunge an hour before I jumped on here with you. I'll do a sauna four or five times. I'm, grateful enough to have one just at home. So I've made it a part of kind of my evening routine. But for the guy that we're speaking to out there, like, what level of importance should he put on some of those hacks out there?
Oh, now you're going to get me in trouble. People are so emotionally invested in some of these things. It works for me, and there's a large placebo effect in things that you enjoy that make you feel better. Personally, my clock gets recharged when I go take a 10-minute walk. I've always said it's, you can be kind of tired. You're sitting there, you feel yourself kind of nodding off in the middle of the day. Get up, go take a walk. I saw some influencer, some motivational speaker one time talk about how she would just count down from 5 to 1, and then she would get up and do whatever it was that she was sitting there procrastinating about. By the time I get from 5 to 1, I'm ADHD, so now I'm off to something else. So I had to do 3, 2, 1. I changed it to 3, 2, 1. It was too quick for me to find something else to distract myself with. But that's kind of where I put a lot of those things. I did a video on the best way to recover from workouts on my Rhinos Rant. And my quote was, "Things that are done to you or for you are never as effective as things you do for yourself." And this was in terms of recovery. And Greg Nuckols did a review of some research talking about different types of therapy, whether it be sauna or cold bath or massage or physical therapy, chiropractics. And he said that, and these are his words, not mine. He said, maybe they're better than nothing, but they pale in comparison to any kind of movement. And so I put them there in terms of their meaningfulness. They're in the 1%. They're not in the 99%. It's not the big rocks, right? I think people, and I hate to even use the term majoring in the minors, because it dismisses their value for individuals who enjoy them. You just took an ice bath an hour ago. Here in American Samoa, where I just moved recently, I take a cold shower every morning. It wakes me up, right? But the meaningfulness in terms of measurable health benefits or performance benefits, hard to put a finger on in randomized controlled trials when you look at these things. And we have studied things like the Wim Hof method and things like ice, and we just don't see meaningful, measurable outcomes for performance. But psychologically, these kinds of things, if they provide you a benefit, then by all means. Here's the challenge, and I talked about this in terms of stretching, and I didn't realize there was a whole stretching religion out there with, and I got attacked. If it replaces something that is meaningful and effective, or if your time constraints are such that this would interfere with something that was more important, like weightlifting. If you were going to stretch instead of weightlift, I would say terrible idea. It doesn't decrease injury risk. It doesn't aid with recovery. There's a whole host of things it doesn't do. It might even impair performance. I've said that if you had to choose between the two and time were of the essence, what's your greater return on your investment? And we're talking about the middle 30 or something with kids potentially and work. And we've talked this entire conversation about what can we do within the constraints of our existing, lifestyle, and how much time do we have to commit to it. I would want you to do something that was more meaningful first, and then add all these other things in after the fact. And don't think that they're the drivers. They're not the big rocks. I don't want people majoring in the minors. I want them to get everything else consistent and optimized first, and then pepper in, if a massage feels good, or if an ice bath or a sauna, there's certainly, additive benefits to those.
Yeah, I know a lot of people will go to the gym, they'll crush a hard weight training session, skip cardio throughout the day. They won't get the 10-minute walks, but they think sitting in the sauna for 15 minutes is going to, decrease or they might even go to the gym and just sit in the sauna because they think heat equals sweat equals fat loss. They don't realize the minute that they throw down some water, they're just replacing everything they've just sweated out. Same thing with kind of like the waistbands, right? And that's for me.
I said this on Mark Bell's podcast years ago, you might recall. I said, if you're religiously taking your thimble-sized scoop of creatine every day and sleeping 5 hours a night, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
That's my point. It's additive, okay? It's the cherry on the cake. It's not the cake, okay? Let's bake the cake first. And then you can add all the Terrys that you want after the fact. I don't care. I'm not going to. And in my questionnaire to my clients, I ask them, what has worked for you and what things have not worked for you? I want to know. And I don't want, not the evidence for those, but what's your personal impression, And if they tell me certain things work for them, and I don't think it's onerous in terms of I don't think it's adversely, I don't think it hurts their progress, or their budget is such that's it's unnecessary, then I won't mention it. I'll leave it alone. If they say it works, it works. I'm not going to get in there and tell Hidetada or who, not Hidetada. Yeah, my God, that who was the batter for the Seattle Seahawks for all those years out of Japan? Ichiro. I lived in Seattle for 20 years, and Ichiro was a stud up there. Everybody loved him. But he had these what do we call those? This certain darn it, there's a word for it when you have a certain behavior that you continue to perform that you feel you need to do in order to be prepared to perform.
Like OCDs type of things, like obsessive compulsive disorders.
Yeah, superstitions.
Superstition. Well, the baseball world. That's I came up in baseball like that. Like if you don't have superstitions as a baseball player, you're not really a baseball player. You're an athlete trying to play baseball.
Exactly, and you have certain things in certain orders. And he had this whole, with the sleeve and he had this whole thing that he had this ritual that he had to go through. And if your ritual, probably a better word than superstition, if your ritual is, that gets you, it helps you with your success throughout the day to have particular repeatable behaviors. And I think that's great. And we often see that mental fatigue builds up pretty quickly when you don't have things aren't built, when things are different all the time and you don't have some consistency in your day, things you don't have to think about. You start to get mental fatigue. And so if people have particular rituals like pre-workout that they like to do, and it's not necessarily evidence-based, but it really helps them get into that moment, then I'm all for that.
Yeah. I have tons of those. Once again, I was a baseball player. So like we live and die by our rituals and our superstitions. Like I have certain songs that I warm up to, and if they don't play in this specific order, I don't feel primed for the workout. That's just how I've kind of built my life, very little things. That's with, the hour before the show. It's like I'm in the plunge. I start kind of setting some things up, get the lights going here, last minute prep. What are we talking about here today? With the evening, it's kind of how I shut down. I'll maybe take a book or take a podcast. And that's kind of where I do a little bit of my entertainment to kind of wind down. But that's what's worked for me. I'd never tell anybody you need to do things exactly the way that I do them. Kirsten, just your life and career of working with thousands of individuals. Obviously, you've had massive success in the high performance world, World's Strongest Man, the UFC, all these kind of guys. But to the everyday individual, knowing all this information it's readily available. It's free. Everybody knows what to eat, what not to eat, how to train, how to sleep, what to supplement. We probably didn't give people a lot of new information here today, but what is it that keeps so many people from actually achieving their goals?
Wow, if I knew that. I was in a seminar with Hafthor Bjornsson once, and somebody asked him, how do you stay motivated? And Hafthor kind of, he kind of made this nice answer. We got in the car to drive away, and he was pissed. He goes, I don't know how fucking people can ask that. Either you are or you aren't. How do you not be motivated? He's a Viking. He was born motivated. He's a type A guy. He's just driven. And I hope that everyone can find a passion in their lives, as we did with our fitness, whether it was competing in bodybuilding or powerlifting or whatever your endeavor is. I hope everyone can find that passion, which is why I say the best exercise is the one you'll do. I picked up pickleball recently, of all things. I'm embarrassed to say how far can one man fall from his peak. And I really enjoy it. I go down here and play indoor pickleball every day with a bunch of the Islanders here. And I love it. And I wish people that same enjoyment in whatever endeavor contributes to their health. That would include diet and exercise, both. I hope that they could find a diet plan that they enjoyed consistently, foods that they could eat that lent themselves to better body composition and long-term health. If I had the answer to that, we talked about the fact that some people just need to be held accountable. I never need anybody to hold me accountable. I sought out the best coaches and training partners I could find to compete with them or impress them in some way, and to learn from them and to, to be able to measurably progress whatever goal it was I was pursuing at the time, whether it was powerlifting or bodybuilding. So, I mean, that's the $64 million question right there. Is how do you motivate folks? Some people are motivated. People are motivated for very many different reasons, in spite of someone, on behalf of someone, for themselves, for money, for accolades and recognition. There's many different reasons why people get motivated. I just hope that I really do wish that everyone could find something that really that they really enjoyed in life, that contributed to their. It doesn't always have to be health necessarily, but it just gave them a sense of purpose and a sense of passion, so that that pursuit of happiness, which is not a destination, it's a journey, as is all of everything we discussed today, becomes meaningful to them.
Well, if people could understand that it truly is about the journey. That's the hacking of the reward system, right? That's understanding that that's where your joy, your passion, your fulfillment is going to be found, and setting realistic, attainable goals that are meaningful to you, but it's really about the pursuit of those on a daily basis. And when you can have structure and you can be intentional and you can build discipline, knowing that you're not going to be motivated over time, it creates a much more meaningful, purpose, joyful life. And I wish the same thing for everybody. I hate to, say these type of things, but sometimes it's got to come. Real change has to come through a wake-up call, right? Whether it's, the loss of a family member, an emergency doctor visit, a very poor blood report, wife steps out on you, kind of taps into my space there a little bit. And my goal here with the show is to give people not just the information, but, the inspiration that your life improves. I grew up in a somewhat of an overweight, family. I remember buying my jeans in the Husky department of JCPenney's as a teenager. And I didn't like the way that made me feel. And, finding the gym, finding Gold's Gym, being surrounded by big bodybuilders and meatheads as a young kid and having them take me under my wing changed my life. I think fitness is a gateway to a lasting, meaningful, superhuman life. And I think you probably would agree with a lot of that as well.
100%, brother. I think you're sending a great message. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Stan. I appreciate you, brother. Your incredible wealth of knowledge. Sometimes I'm blown away at your ability to retain as much information. What's the hack there to be able to retain as much information as you do?
I'm glad you asked that, because I wanted to summarize on what you just concluded with there. To help people develop their passion, write things down. Write your goal down. Chris Bell talked one time about he wrote it on the mirror in his bathroom. There you go. I mentioned earlier I have the spreadsheet with the days of the month and things. I have a yellow pad of paper that I work off of for my to-do list. If I put my to-do list items into my Outlook calendar on my phone, every time I turn my phone off, it's like it's gone, right? I have a yellow pad of paper and I write things down on it. I did a rant once where I talked about the fact that sometimes I'll identify those things as whether or not it's something I even have any control over, right? Knowing the difference between those things which you have any ability to impact, or whether it's out of your control. They call it serenity prayer, right? I'll try and prioritize the things on the list, but they're on there. Dr. Matthew Walker, a sleep specialist, talked about using it as a worry journal at night, offloading some of the stress onto it, and then setting it next to your bed so you can go to sleep, and then you'll know they'll be there in the morning. You don't have to sit there and, whether it's a to-do list of items that you don't want to forget. So I write all those things down, and that becomes really helpful. With respect to all of the things that we talked about today, I've had the opportunity to present over 200 seminars in 17 countries in all 50 states. And I created a slideshow, a presentation, where each of these topics is addressed and discussed in those seminars. And I memorialized it in my ebook as well, The Vertical Diet, which is all of the chapters discussing all the things we discussed today, along with all the references to the research that I commonly talk about, and the individuals that who I give credit for having brought that information to me. Not that it's some invention of theirs, but it's the path through which the individuals through which I get this information. that helps. And I think Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about that in his book, 12 Rules for Life, that it helps to write out your thoughts on certain topics so that you can articulate them. And so I do that a lot. I've got piles of scratchings where I try and formulate my position on a certain topic and bring into it the pros and cons and the opposition and the people I reference that agree with me. But the point is that oftentimes you have a hard time articulating things if you haven't sat down and really kind of thought about it. Even if you've watched other people talk about it, if you haven't put that into some sort of document that allows you to discuss all the nuances of a topic, it's kind of hard to present that to other people. And I've had a lot of practice with that. It started with creating the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation. And then, of course, as I presented it and then answered questions about it, I became more confident or refined the message, changed, updated as I went along. And so I'm really comfortable now. I've received thousands of questions from people all over the world. I've probably responded to over 100,000 DMs in the last 5 years. When people send me DMs, I try and respond. And I might copy and paste an article or a video that I saw that was relative to their question. I feel like I've heard it all. And I'm not out there trying to be right about it. I'm just trying to get them directed to where I think that there's a consensus amongst the domain-specific professionals in that particular arena.
Stan, that's incredible, man. And journaling has changed my life. And, it's a big hack we give to our guys on the behavioral change side of things. So I'm so glad we kind of ended and, wrapping things up here today. Obviously, easy to find on the internet. We'll plug all the socials down there below, the Vertical Diet. Outside of, chasing becoming the world's strongest pickleball pro, anything else you're kind of excited about right now that, we can kind of tell the guys about?
Yeah, I'm the Vertical Diet has always been kind of the foundation. The book has evolved now to the Vertical Diet 4.0 version, which is over 250 pages with more than 200 references to peer-reviewed published research and articles and videos. So now I'm writing a book called The World's Strongest Diet, where I'm going to talk specifically about bulking, the mass manual for what I did for Mitchell Hooper, current world's strongest man, and Hafthor Bjornsson and Brian Shaw and many of the other strongmen that I've worked with. I get a lot of questions from high school and collegiate athletes in particular, and some pros about just packing on mass. And so I'm writing a very specific book that is easy for them to implement. That's a little lighter on all of the scientific stuff. And then Dr. Damon McCune and I have been working on for some time, and we hope it might take us another year. Vertical Kids, from conception to college, to talk to parents about their diets and about their kids' diets through infancy and puberty and as they get into an adult. So we're putting that together. Those are the two big projects I have on the table. And then I'm launching a World's Strongest Bar. It should be out next month. Of all things, I'm not a huge supplement guy, but food is always food, and it's a really high protein, high calorie. It'll be like a 440 calorie protein bar with over 40 grams of protein in it. That's easy on the stomach, because a lot of those bars give me the shits, and so I tried to make one that didn't do that. And so the World's Strongest Bar should be out hopefully within another month or 8 weeks.
Oh, that's exciting. I can't wait for that and testing those out. I'm the same. It's hard to find a bar. Sometimes you're craving something and you want to have something quick on the go. And same way my body doesn't really take to a lot of the things that are out there. Yeah. But you gave us kind of the theme for our next two conversations. I'd love to come back and have you come back on and talk about the kids' nutrition and diet. And obviously I think we could do an episode on bulking as well. So if you're up for it, maybe we'll stay in touch and maybe have you come back in a couple months and maybe unpack one of those a little bit. Bringing things to a close here, we usually have the same question that we ask every single episode. I asked you last time what it meant to live a superhuman life. Take that and kind of tweak it here a little bit. In your opinion, Stan, what value and importance does being physically fit and strong as a man play in living a superhuman life? Yeah,
boy, I tell you, I think we touched on it with the stress for success. It's the foundation of everything. I said in that video, my Rhinos rant, pay yourself first. You'll be better with your marriage. You'll be better, a better example for your children. You'll be better in your business, aside from performance. Obviously you'll be better physically there. But pay yourself first. Get the sleep, regular exercise, a healthy diet. Everything improves as a result. That's the foundation upon which all those other things sit and get better as a result.
Amen, brother. Guys, you asked for it. We brought him back. Stan, share this one just like you did the last one. We want to see this one blow up the internet. I'm sure we will. Stan, it's been an absolute honor, man. Get out there, enjoy your pickleball on this Friday afternoon, man, out there in the beautiful American Samoa. But I appreciate you, brother, for everything you bring to our world and our fitness community, man. God bless you, man.
Thank you for having me, brother. All my best.
All right, bud. Bye.